Hi everybody, and welcome back to Thinque Prep's YouTube channel. My name is Nina. You may have seen me in some other videos, but today I'll be doing something I've never done before. I'm going to be doing a mini rhetorical analysis of Justin Bieber's Notes app manifesto, is what I'm calling it, that he came out with a couple years ago in response to his Oprah interview talking about his past drug abuse and his marriage to Hailey Baldwin. For those of you who aren't familiar, a rhetorical analysis is a type of critical reading that you might do in your AP Lang class if you're a student of composition and rhetoric, or if you're just interested in any kind of piece that's supposed to persuade someone. Rhetorical analyses look at how the author does what they do. So if they have a claim that they're trying to make or something that they're trying to convince the reader of, they're going to use various strategies to try to get there. Sometimes these strategies are used deliberately, but sometimes they're unconscious. So I'll be looking at kind of both of those kinds of strategies throughout this text today. Even though this was written on Justin Bieber's Notes app and posted to Instagram, I would actually consider this a pretty solid piece of rhetoric. Go ahead and take a moment to read this yourself, and then we'll talk about some notable moments. So it appears that the purpose of this Notes app message is not an apology like a lot of Notes app posts are, but rather more of an explanation of Bieber's life so far and a promise to his audience that he has recovered and that he is going to do better. There are a few things I want to point out here. In the beginning, he starts talking about, how there are these times in your life when you're feeling overwhelmed. Up in those first few lines, up until where you feel like it's never going to change, he uses the second person to include his audience. And he's also using a lot of appeals to emotion here. He's appealing to a sense of pity or sympathy with his audience to try and get the audience on his team before he really launches into his story. He ends the section with the statement, "I can fully sympathize with you," setting himself up as a sympathetic and thoughtful speaker. You may have heard of appealing to ethos before, in which an author tries to build up their own credibility so that they're likable to a reader, and I think it's that kind of moment here. Later on, he uses a rhetorical question where he says, "Have you noticed the statistics of child stars and the outcome of their life?" Of course, it's not meant to be answered, but he's trying to make the audience reflect on their own experiences with the news and hearing about child stars, and thinking about what this might have done to the child star Justin Bieber. The next section of his message, beginning with "There's an insane pressure and responsibility," and ending with where he talks about rationality coming with age, I would say are actually a series of examples of logos or appealing to logic. He's explaining how his parents were 18 and were separated, that he became famous so early. He's trying to offer all of these pieces of evidence, right, to appeal to the reader's sense of logic or rationality, thinking that, oh, okay, if I were him and my parents had me at 18 and were separated, if I became a child star this early, maybe that would have happened to me too, right? It's trying to develop a line of reasoning of if this, then that. So he's trying to get the audience on the same page with him in saying that, see, it makes sense why I was in this sort of place. One more pretty clear example of logos specifically is where he says rationality comes with age and so does your decision-making process. One of the reasons you can't drink until you're 21. And we'll ignore some of his typos here and throughout the message and see that he uses one of the reasons you can't drink until you're 21 as a piece of evidence to support his argument, right? A specific example. And as writers, we're always trying to look for specific examples to support our more general claims. Later on, he makes interesting use of parallelism, where he says he went from one of the most loved and adored people in the world to the most ridiculed, judged, and hated person in the world. You can see here that he's using parallel structure in the sentence to really emphasize the transformation that he made from being loved and adored to hated and despised by the public. Though I mentioned that Bieber does use some good instances of logical reasoning, have a little tip for anybody who is trying to persuade as he is here. He says later that being on stage according to studies is a bigger dopamine rush than almost any other activity. Would love a little bit more details on those studies. When you just say that studies say it, doesn't back you up very well. So I'm not saying that Bieber has to have, a whole MLA citation here, but I've never heard of those kinds of studies, so it might help for him to maybe have a note of some kind about who may have said that. He also makes a big generalization later where he says, you notice a lot of touring bands and people end up having a phase of drug abuse, and I believe it's due to not being able to manage the huge up and downs that come with being an entertainer. That is a pretty broad generalization, so we want to try to stay away from those in our writing. Bieber makes an interesting turn towards the end of his message here, where he refers to his faith in God and his life as a Christian. He says that God blessed him with extraordinary people who love him for him. He tells the audience that Jesus loves them and that they can love people by God's perfect, unfailing love. And I think this is an interesting turn, only because I don't think that maybe up until that point a lot of people identified Bieber as a Christian, but he's really kind of, not in a manipulative way necessarily, but he is appealing to Christians in his audience who may maybe see him in a more positive or a more trustworthy light because he does appeal to his faith in saying that he has been spiritually transformed as a person over the years. So I think that's kind of an interesting turn. And he does end on an encouraging note that's supposed to make the reader feel positive about Bieber's life and maybe even about their own life, right? An encouraging tone that helps them see that even if they've made mistakes too, that they can move on and they can go to a better place. So some people think that doing a rhetorical analysis is just for, writing about the works of Plato, for example, or some kind of really serious classical literature. But as you can see today, you can do rhetorical analyses of all kinds of texts, even those in pop culture. If you'd like to see me do a rhetorical analysis of another kind of pop culture text, maybe a celebrity apology, who knows? Let me know in the comments and I will be happy to take a look at it. As always, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. My name is Nina, and I hope you have a great day.